Colin, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me, dude. I'm sure just based on what we were just yapping about, we're gonna have some good chats today, man.
Yeah, I was like, I gotta hit record. I feel like all this stuff we mentioned before I even hit record, but I just know that we're gonna go down some rabbit holes. We're gonna talk about some truths. We're gonna talk about things that people question all the time, and that's kind of where you live, man. Like you started in the paranormal world on YouTube and grew one of the largest paranormal channels, and just doing some research on you, I'm like, you've produced full on like movies for your YouTube channel. How did that even start?
Yeah, it's funny because when I was younger, the one thing that I always wanted to be was a film director. And when I was young, I'd make zombie films and like really kind of messed up horror movies. And my dad and I would build blood cannons, and I really got into that side of film. And
Yeah.
when I was in high school, my family moved into a house, which was interesting, and this is a whole story in itself, but the house ended up being haunted. But what was interesting about the house is that my parents built it. There was no history to the
Huh.
home. No one died there. We didn't disturb an ancient burial ground or something like that. It was just a brand new house. And from the moment that we moved in, we experienced stuff. So that turned into me telling everybody at school, at my high school, like, oh my God, my house is haunted. And my friends started to have experiences. And then there were people that didn't want to come over to my house at all because they had seen whatever or heard whatever. And eventually, people at my school who were involved with the school newspaper invited me to do a ghost hunt at my actual high school because there were rumors that it was haunted. I had never heard these stories, but I agreed and I went with them into the basement of the school, which is like a big catacomb, almost like network of tunnels that are underneath the school. It's super creepy.
Wow.
It's a whole subfloor under the whole floor plan of the school.
I've never heard of that for a school.
No, dude, I didn't know that it was a thing until, I went down there, and it was literally like the upside down, like Stranger Things. It was the entire floor plan of the school, but like creepy catacombs version with old chairs from the 1960s and like weird substances. But anyways, we had all this stuff happen, and I didn't have a camera with me. And so I practically begged my teachers and principal to let me come in and do it again and film it. And we did. And that became the first episode of my YouTube channel. We had a premiere at my high school, and we had like the local news come out, and I was on the front page of the newspaper as like the ghost hunting guy. And it's really crazy, man, because when I started digging into my high school and asking teachers, all of a sudden I'm talking to whatever my computer teacher, and she's telling me the story about seeing a guy floating through her classroom. I'm like, you've seen this? Yeah, this was like 5 years ago. Then she tells me someone else has a story, and before I know it, I'm like, this place is definitely haunted, and no one's talking about it. There are all these teachers that had experiences and old janitorial staff. I brought one guy in who the principal reached out to for me, and he was so afraid. He had seen something in the school and quit like the day of.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's like in the footage, he's shaking his hands because he hadn't been in there in 20 something years. He had seen someone floating on stage in the auditorium, like just no legs, no feet, just floating there. And he was so scared he quit. And obviously, no one was talking about it. And it was really cool because we were able to compile all those stories and then investigate it. And nowadays, I'll see YouTube videos or like top 10 lists where they say top 10 most haunted schools in America. And it's like my high school makes its way onto those lists now, which is cool, you know.
Yeah.
I don't
So,
know if they like that, but
well, I
it's
mean,
there.
you're stuck with whatever public school you're going to go to. So I guess at that point it doesn't matter. Maybe from a staff perspective,
Right.
people don't necessarily want to work there. But I want to go back to the home. What kind of stuff were you experiencing as a kid after your parents built this home? And was that like the first kind of like experience that you saw or had, or was it like you've always been? I know you said you were into horror movies. I know a lot of people who are into horror movies don't even necessarily believe in ghosts. So like,
Right.
how did you like kind of bring that all into your life in the from a real perspective? Because I think most people see that and they block it out and they never want to see it again. You clearly embraced it.
Yeah. Well, for me, there's a history of paranormal sightings, and I wouldn't call it abilities because it sounds cheesy, but there have just always been these oral ghost stories handed down in my family. Like my great grandma saw her sister the night that her sister died. Like she
Hmm.
came to her in her bedroom and she knew something was wrong. Then she got the phone call. Like stories like that. Um, but for me, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 12 years old. And obviously, that has a profound impact on who you are as a person and what you think about. And I was only 12 and I was forced to confront death and life and, the reality of living a shorter life than most people, even though nowadays the treatment's better than it even was 15 years ago. Um, but so when I started learning about ghosts and the paranormal, it became my fixation because, I was afraid to die. I still am in my
Yeah.
own way because I'm more confused than I was, I guess, when I started. But it's just one of those things where when it started happening in our house, I dove in, but it wasn't fun. It ended up being really horrifying, and we had everything happening. It was like a classic poltergeist style, like haunted house film where
Wow.
first day we go, uh, my sister, my mom and dad and I leave our house because our old house like 5 minutes away. So we leave my sister in the new house, and we told her we're gonna go get some more boxes, bring them over. Yeah, we'll be right back. And by the time we get back with the boxes, she's trying to climb out of her bedroom window and taking the screen off the window because she's locked her door. And when we get in there, she tells us she heard men talking in the kitchen area and like banging around and making noises.
Wow.
And we're like, okay, no one's there. You know, at the time I was, I think, 14. I can't remember my exact age, but my sister's 4 years younger than me. So it's kind of one of those things where do you think, I don't know, I mean, maybe they are just that she heard something and it wasn't really what she was hearing, or you do the classic horror movie thing where it's like, okay, whatever, brush it off. But yeah, it got so bad actually that I heard my mom's voice when she wasn't there
Oh,
multiple times, which was really, really spooky. And this one night, I heard her in the kitchen, and I can't remember. I said something to her because she had said something, and I think I asked her to like bring something into my room for me. And I heard her say like, "Yeah, I'll be right in." And then I heard footsteps coming all the way down this long hallway that led to my sister and I's rooms, who were right across from each other. And you got to imagine I'm sitting and staring at my doorway. There's some ambient light that's kind of coming through, but I'm expecting my mom to walk into the door because you hear the footsteps.
yeah.
As soon as the steps get to the door, no one comes around the corner, but I hear this weird noise, and then all of a sudden, it's like somebody is on all fours crawling around my bed in circles, like and it was so bizarre that I literally stood, like, sat right up in my bed, and I was like, Mom, what the fuck are you doing? And I turned my iPhone flashlight on. Noises stopped immediately. And my sister came out of her room. It had woken her up, and she was like, What's going on? And I went over to my parents, and they were in their bedrooms asleep. So it's,
Wow.
that was just one of like hundreds of things. And I actually have a totally different perspective on what I think it was now that was haunting our house than I did back then because we did some research and we found the family that lived on the property in the 1800s. This is in South Dakota, so this is like Sioux Falls, South Dakota. That's where I was born and raised, and it was a very pioneer town,
Yeah.
obviously Western expansion and everything. And back then, there's no proper city cemetery. So when my mom and I went down to the courthouse and got access to the old maps and records, man, it was crazy because the dude at the historical society was able to tell us who the family was that had owned that land, who had set up on that land, and the mother and daughter, as he looked in the files, had death and burial records in Sioux Falls, but the father and son in the family didn't have either. And he
Mm,
told us, well, since it was before cemetery, maybe there was an accident or there was something that happened or their graves got lost. And we never found out if their graves had maybe, been moved or something had happened there. And so that's what I thought it was the whole time because totally different thing that happened. We had a family friend who's a psychic, and before my mom and I went to the courthouse and looked at that, and I talked about this in a documentary I eventually did about the case because I have some little proof of this whole event happening. A psychic, this psychic friend of ours called us and told my mom and I, it feels like there are two male spirits in your home.
Mm.
And we thought, okay, well, that's really freaky. She said she was driving by our new house and she felt this. And then we're
Wow.
having all this
Just out of
shit happen
nowhere.
and she didn't even know out of nowhere. And then to find out that it was the two, the father and son didn't have death or burial records. I at the time was like, oh my God. And I filmed all this and I had the footage of the guy going through all the files. And to me, that was the narrative of what the haunting was. But we tried to cleanse the home. We had this whole thing with our psychic friend, and she had two other psychic friends, and they showed up like almost like American Horror Story wearing these big fur coats, and they went room through room in the house with our family doing these blessings, and oh, we found this spirit's in here, and oh, this is a portal here, and all this cleansing, and it was like an hours long process. That night, our power went out at the house, completely blackout. We're the only one on the block, just unexplained. And the next day, when we go to eat lunch, the psychics are actually eating lunch at the same restaurant, all three of them. And we had no idea that they were going to be there. The night before that, at about 2 in the morning, it was actually my birthday. So it was like the night before my birthday, and I had friends over for like a sleepover. And we heard this bang on my window that all my friends heard. It was so loud that my parents woke up upstairs and came running downstairs and thought we had broken something or somebody got hurt.
Wow.
And all of us were like, we have no idea what the hell that was. And so the next day at lunch, when the psychics are there, we walk up to them and they tell us that they are having a meeting. They called each other because they had all experienced this bang on their windows at whatever time it was, 2 in the morning, and they're all there. And we're like, okay, we also had that happen to. I mean, I was freaked. I still get freaked when I talk about it. But they told me at the time, I feel like that is the energy leaving your home and it's letting us know I'm out of here. But it didn't happen like that. And the haunting actually continued for years and it never really went away. And then my parents sold the house and uh I mean I've never reached out to the people who live in the house now, but I don't know. I used to think it was these guys that were that this father and son that had the records there, but nowadays I feel like it's something more unexplainable that was almost attracted to my family, which I know
Mm.
this is a very long tangent and answer to your
No, I
question,
love it.
but that's kind of in a nutshell, man. There's so much more that went into it that was just like crazy, but yeah, I think it was just an energy that there had been some like kind of just tragedy in my family at the time, so it was really low energy. Everyone was really just not in good spirits when we moved in, and I feel like there was something that if it's possible for something to do this, felt that and like globbed onto us and wanted that, and it's never really left. Like I have psychics all the time I work with from my YouTube, and there's this one spirit and it's not a human spirit, but it's something that follows me all the time. And I do meditations every night. I've been sober for almost 3 years now, and it's like sometimes during these meditations that I do, I feel this thing like, and it sounds crazy and it sounds like hard to believe, but I genuinely, in my heart of hearts, in my soul, and I'm not like recording this for a video or doing anything with. This is just what I'm experiencing. I feel this thing come right up to my face, and it's like my whole body, all my hair stands on end, and I get
Jeez.
goosebumps, and I know that it's this thing. And I even had sleep paralysis 3 years ago. I had sleep paralysis for about 4 months straight, and it ended with, in a very similar encounter, something going right up to my face, and it whispered right in my ear, "I'm the demon," just like that. And I woke up
Jeez.
screaming, and my wife Courtney was screaming, and that was the last time I had sleep paralysis, but it was so real, man. It's like it's just it's something that you can't even explain. You can't put into words because it sounds so insane that, unless you experience something like that, you're not really inclined to believe that it's real, but I can assure you it's it's very real.
Yeah, and to be fair, like I imagine you get a lot of pushback. You have a massive following across
Yeah.
all platforms. and I imagine a lot of people are like, this guy's crazy. Like, ghosts aren't
Of
real, like
course.
all that stuff. But you're somebody who's gone into all of these different buildings all over. We were talking about how I'm in Pennsylvania and you lived in Philly for a while. And there's a very famous place called Penhurst Asylum with a crazy, like, backstory of how they mistreated kids within the building. And if I remember correctly, there's a morgue there. There's like a graveyard on site. There's all these things that had happened. Like going into these different places, is there ever a moment where you go in and hey, I've heard this is the most haunted place, and I go in and there's nothing?
Yeah. Oh yeah, many times. And I think that's what's really interesting about the paranormal. And one of the challenges with producing a paranormal like program like I've been doing for this is the 11th year this year, which is crazy. Um,
Congratulations, by the way, man, on all your success.
thanks. Thanks. Yeah,
It's
it's
not
been
easy.
I no, and I didn't expect to be doing this. When I started the channel, and I dropped out of film school in Austin. I went to my academic advisor and told him, my YouTube's taken off. I just feel like this is going to be what I'm going to do. And he told me, you should do it. You should drop out. If you have this, you should do it now. And then I did, and I had my first million view video like 2 or 3 weeks later, which
Wow.
I don't know. That's the universe to me. That's, a sign from whatever, whoever you believe in.
Yeah, keep
But
going.
when
That's
it
what it
comes to the
is, man.
paranormal and shit, man, it's crazy. Like I've gone to like the most haunted places on earth. Like some of these places, they hype them up. Like, there's fucking demons crawling out of the walls and like pentagrams will glow in the mirrors. And, there's this shadow woman that screams and attacks you. And it's like, I've been there and I've asked for things to possess me and I've asked to get scratched and said you could do literally whatever. And I'm there with the genuinely curious mind because that is something I think is very important with the paranormal is your intent and how you go into it, which we could talk about later. And then it doesn't happen. But on the flip side of the coin, I have had so many experiences where it's just some random place. Like, one of the craziest things, I just went back to this place recently. There's this it's called the Garnet House Hotel or Garnet House Inn. It's in Kansas and some really messed up history in this building, but it's just like a small little building in the middle of nowhere in Kansas. And I had heard people comment and tell me like you should go investigate this location because it's super active for a long time, and I never had. But 3 years ago, at the end of our trip, we did like a 10-day trip, and I think we did 8 investigations. The
Jeez.
very last night, we go to this place, and it's like, dude, we're all burned out. We've been up till 4 or 5 a.m. every night for 7 nights straight, driving across the state of Kansas and Missouri. You're just kind of like, okay, let's just do this and be done with this series because I'm tired. That was ended up being the most activity I think besides my house I've ever seen in my life, and it was so shocking that it completely reinvigorated me and got me reinterested in the paranormal. A doll was thrown at us on camera, and a beach ball came flying out of an attic at us. We heard footsteps and like a straight up like if someone just the wall behind you just banged with their fist. That was
Jeez.
the craziest shit ever. And we all were just like we kind of went in like tired, like, okay, let's just, see if there's something here. But yeah, it's weird. It's the paranormal is just weird like that, man. And also the last thing I'll say to that point that's interesting is when you see when you hear ghost stories and you hear, these tales from people who live and work at these locations, and I've heard so many of them because we always interview someone for our video. It's like Jenny, or we'll just call her Jenny. She's worked at this prison for 20 years. She's been the tour guide here for 20 years, and she spends 6, 7 hours a day in this location. But when you ask her and you interview her, like, what have you had experience wise? She'll have like 3 or 4 really good stories over a 15, 20 year period,
Yeah.
which is why when you have a show, it's like you're never going to see the ghost on camera. You're never going to see, uh, this cup levitating and then shattering against a wall because it just does. It's so infrequent and rare. And I do think it's intelligent enough to happen when you're not recording or actually, uh, documenting it. It's weird. I've got a lot of theories, but that's kind of the tip of the iceberg there.
No, I'm sure. And so like, you talked about you have to be in a certain mindset to be able to interact with these spirits or potentially see them or whatever. Like I know dang well I don't ever want to see a ghost because I enjoy my sleep too much and I'll never sleep ever again. But I've had experiences. So when I met my now wife, when we started dating, she was in a house that she was like, "Oh, it's haunted." And I was like, "Okay." And I remember many nights sleeping there and hearing footsteps down the hall to her door. Now she had two kids, two little kids at the time. They're grown, not grown. They're 12 and 15. But like we'd open the door, there'd be no kid. They'd be asleep, in the hall. The one night we're laying in bed and we heard a voice. Like, and this was the creepiest thing ever. We heard a voice said "mom." So assuming we're like, we kind of froze. Whereas like if she heard "mom" back then, she'd jump out of bed and run down the hall. But we both like froze, right? And so we're like, and I think she said it first. She goes, "Did you hear that?" I go, "Yeah, I heard that." And she got up. The kids were dead asleep. Like nobody said "mom." And then I think the time after that I was sleeping over, the sheets on the bed got lifted up and thrown off of me. We found out, like, what we figured is that the spirits didn't like me as a male energy. Like it was like one of those weird things, like, oh, a new energy, a new male, and so we're gonna stoke the flames. Do you notice sometimes if you kind of disturb something, they'll start to kind of wake up a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we used to provoke and do stuff like that all the time, and I don't know. I mean, for me, that was immature to call things out. I know some people still swear by that method, but I've just adapted to respecting the dead. However, when it comes to these inhuman things that we don't understand, I love poking the bear when it comes to that. I'm not a religious person, but if I go to a house that's known to be a demon house, right? I will specifically go out of my way to bring like a blessed crucifix or blessed rosary beads or whatever to try provoke these things into attacking or doing whatever. And that's, years ago when I started the channel, my one of my biggest things was I don't believe in demons, and I would say it over and over again.
Mm,
Uh, this shit isn't real, and people are clickbaiting this and yada yada. But I've done 560, 570, however, 600 investigations at this point across the planet, from Romania to Greece to all over America. And I can confidently tell you there is an intelligent spiritual force that exists that is non-human, that is out there. And
yeah.
that is what, in my opinion, people call demons. And I call them demons too, as kind of just a catch-all term because people understand what I'm getting at instead of me saying like my more technical term is non-human energies or non-human intelligent energies. And I don't know. They're never really good spirits. I have to tell you. I have to be very honest. Whenever we've interacted with these things, it is like it gets really spooky really quick. Like it'll call out things that you don't even know about yourself or my parent. Like it's made in one investigation, it made my dad cry because through one of our devices, it sounded like it was making fun of my aunt, his sister, who had died of a particularly painful form of cancer. And it was every
Oh my
word was
gosh.
just making fun of like seemingly her. And it hit so hard to him. He was like sobbing and we had to stop and like take a step outside. And that is what I think, going back to my haunted house, globbed onto us and what is globbed onto, me still nowadays, or they exist at some of these locations and it's very real and it's a distinct type of energy. It's very violent usually.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, have you ever been touched, attacked, scratched, all that stuff?
Yeah, I've been scratched multiple times. My brother-in-law's been scratched, my dad's been scratched. And it's always really freaky because like, and I show this in the videos, the scratches are not really, I feel like it's a weird term when you say you were scratched and it's a popular paranormal thing, but the stuff that we've seen isn't ever really like an actual scratch. It's like a raised welt on your skin that
Yeah.
will appear, and then like 20 minutes later, it's already gone. And it's like it was never there in the first place. And we've documented that every time, like showing, all right, here's this mark that just appeared, and then 20 minutes later, like check the time, it's completely gone. What is that? I don't know. Is that the body's like allergic reaction to
Yeah.
paranormal energy? I don't claim to know. So I don't tell anybody what, my thoughts are really. I have my theories, but I'm inclined to believe that more often than not, the energies that are out there are more often like non-human versus human. Like I think we've talked to a lot of human spirits, but I don't know. After 11 years of doing it on YouTube, it's like I just never really feel like if I'm talking to a human spirit with our stuff, I don't feel like it's intelligent. When we've had these intelligent
Mm,
conversations, I feel like it's these non-human whatever these things. If
yeah.
that makes sense. It sounds crazy, but the answers just they don't click. It's not like, if we're in the house where the ghost bride is, if we ask her about her wedding day, we're gonna get answers. But if this other thing comes in and starts talking to us and we can talk to it and it starts responding, that's when it gets weird. But it always seems to veer towards like a peculiar negativity.
Yeah, so it's almost like if it's a human spirit, it's almost like a residual energy left behind. Whereas these demons or whatever you want to call them, they're intelligent enough to manipulate, hurt, all these things, and it's just a totally different. Like you almost can't even compare the two.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a very important distinction to make here. I think that there are good non-human intelligent entities and inversely also bad ones. The bad ones just tend to make more noise or make themselves known more. But I mean, I've had like even today, I had a sign this morning. Like when I went to rehab, I've been sober for 3 years and I almost three, 2.5, but who's really counting?
I'm sure you are, man. Congratulations.
Yeah,
That's a
I
big
have.
feat too.
Thank you, man. It's been crazy, but yeah, I was in rehab in Austin for 40 days roughly, and the first day when I went in there, and this is part of what has expanded my mind too, is just like these core experiences. When I was in there, we did this breath work on my very first day, and you do this breath work and then you're supposed to sit and visualize that they said visualize what you think God is, like if
Mm.
God's nature or an actual Christian God or whatever, visualize it. And so I'm sitting there and in the black of my eyes I see this butterfly just fly across my vision. And so I wrote down in my rehab journal, God is a butterfly. And I shit you not, man. The last day when I'm leaving rehab after 40 days of whatever counseling and trauma dumping and being sober for the first time since I was like 17, um, I'm walking alone to the cabin area where the main meetings are from my area. And after this meeting, you literally leave. Like you walk out of the door. I got all my stuff. I'm ready to go. And as I'm walking out, this huge monarch butterfly comes and just lands on my shirt, and I stare every time I get my hairs all stand on end. I stared at it. It felt like it like looked me in the eyes, and then it flew away. And that's why I got this tattoo. I got the
Dude, I love it,
butterfly,
man.
and my wife and I. Then weirdly later on, my wife and I were talking about me being in rehab right when I got home, and you can't make it up. We're sitting there talking about how glad we are that I did this for myself and for us. And on the TV, on the Google stock photos, there's a fucking butterfly pops up on the screen as we're talking about this, and I'm like, I took a picture of it. I'm like freaking out, but now I've seen these butterflies, and I see them at really really meaningful times. And I just actually had a great conversation with one of the Epstein survivors. Her name is Juliet the other day. Total three or 180 here, but
I was about to 180 us anyway, so you're doing this for me, which is great.
yeah, she told me, and there's apparently a whole thing within the Epstein survivors and the Epstein story. If you get into the metaphysical side of things, with butterflies and specifically this blue butterfly, and I can't remember what she was saying, but she just did a podcast on it with somebody. But like her journal that she was showing me from the time of the abuse, had a blue butterfly on it, and there's something with Virginia Giuffre, and she had one of Epstein's main accusers.
Yeah.
She had the blue butterfly motif. It's like a lot of these victims have had these blue butterflies, whether they're tattoos or whatever. And so when she was telling me that, I'm like, holy shit, I got to tell you about my butterfly story too, because I don't know. When you sit back and think about it, it's like, especially for rehab, butterfly coming out of a cocoon and
Hmm.
transformation and rebirth. And I didn't even make that connection until like a month later. And it kind of hit me like a train, like, holy shit,
Yeah. Yeah,
this
dude.
is very real.
I dive into spirituality a lot on this podcast. And there's so many interwoven connections that we have to nature, to each other. We're all connected in some way, shape, or form. And when I talk about spirituality, it's funny because a lot of times people, I grew up, dude. My grandfather was a pastor, so like I grew up in the church. I don't go to church now. I'm not religious, but when I look at spirituality, I say believe in two things. One is greater. Something is greater and bigger than you that created all this, whatever you believe it to be, right? I don't care if it's God, source, Mother Nature, whatever. The second piece is you have to believe that we're all energy, which is just science, right? It's true. We're electrons, protons, and neutrons. And part of you seeing that butterfly, in my opinion, and having the spiritual conversations I had was like you're finally in alignment energetically. And this was your sign, right? When you look at that rebirth, the butterfly, all the things. And then you also have the other side. I mean, if you have that kind of with the Epstein survivors, which I'm sure was a crazy conversation. It's that you look at a butterfly and they're just free, right? Like they're flipping and flapping all over the place. And I imagine when you're in that world, you feel anything but free. It's same with being an alcoholic, right? And then finally being free from that disease. It's just this crazy, crazy thing, man. So thank you so much for sharing that with me. I think that's huge. And obviously, you shifted gears for us, right? Now, a lot of your content has now shifted to what's happening in the world with the pedophile rings, Epstein, and even before that, I know you're creating a documentary to talk about the original Epstein Island, which is totally before, right? Like I believe, Epstein is just the tip of the iceberg. Everybody's looking at him as like the main boss, but it's not even close to the end. Why the shift in your content to beginning to research this type of thing?
Well, I think it's been a slow, gradual shift for me because I've always been interested in true crime and these documentaries, and I've had a lot of weird experiences myself. Like I was with one of the almost victims of the Rainy Street Ripper, the serial killer in Austin. The night
Yeah.
he went missing from Rainy Street, I was out with him that night, and his body was found by the river days later. He's counted as one of the victims, and I
Mm,
saw, we were all normal that night. We were drunk, but it's not like anybody's gonna go. Like I lived in Austin for 8 years. Like you're not gonna walk down to the fucking river and just jump in. That's just
yeah.
impossible. That's a whole different tangent. But so I had a lot of these experiences, and my wife Courtney and I, when we first started dating, she was listening to a bunch of true crime shows, and we'd have these kind of talks about what we liked and what we thought people could do better on and what we'd like out of a show. And so we decided I had all this extra podcast gear lying around from a failed paranormal podcast that I tried to launch, which was crazy, actually. We were bringing equipment into haunted locations, like full on these arms and everything, and a table, setting up in the middle of these locations and then interviewing people and doing the podcast live from these haunted spots, which was crazy. And it was a
It
ton
is.
of work, but it was interesting because we'd be like talking like this, and then there'd be like banging from this upstairs. We were in a prison once, and we heard like somebody walking on one of the grates, and you just stop. You're like, oh, well, that's interesting. Anyways, let's keep on going. It's wild, but yeah. So we launched Murder in America, which has been our show together. And doing the show, we eventually did an episode about John Wayne Gacy. We did a four-part series about Gacy, and this was the first time that I had ever heard of a guy named John David Norman. Who have you heard of this dude and
I have
Gacy?
not, dude. Oh, Gacy, of course, but not the other. So my wife and I, we watch way too many murder documentaries. So I know the world, but I don't know the second name you mentioned.
He is so modern day. A lot of people, including myself, believe John Wayne Gacy did not act alone. Same with Dean Corll, the Candyman serial killer down here in Houston. I actually live in the Heights in Houston, and Dean Corll would hunt kids like on my street. His candy shop was a few
Sheesh.
blocks over. I just found that out the other day. It's a 3-minute walk from my place. Like
Wow.
the connection there is insane, and I've done whole documentaries about him, and I had no idea he was like right here. But yeah, in our episode, we explored this connection between this pedophile ringleader from Texas named John David Norman, how he was allegedly supplying boys to be used in snuff films by the Candyman who got all of his victims here, and they were filming all of this and distributing all of this child CSAM material out there. And then John David Norman got arrested and he went to Illinois. And shortly afterwards, he ends up in the same world as John Wayne Gacy. And John David Norman's like top man who's helping him run his CSAM production ring ends up working for John Wayne Gacy. And then Gacy on death row names John David Norman and says, there are so many more people implicated in this than you guys were ever ready to accept. And that to me was eye opening. And I'm like, okay, I've never even heard of this, but holy shit, the evidence is extremely compelling. And that's what I started digging into these rings and just doing research on my own. And I started to go kind of crazy, if we're going to be honest. Like Courtney at one point told me, like, you need to start your own podcast talking about this stuff because I can't listen to you rant for like another hour about whatever this ring that you found. And I'm like, I know, I feel like I'm going crazy because no one knows this shit. And yeah, that led to the creation of my podcast slash second YouTube channel, The Conspiracy Files, and then these docu-series that I've been working on, where we've actually been working with victims who were trafficked as a part of these historical rings. We have confronted perpetrators, like we knocked on the front doors of multiple
Wow.
people, yeah, and confronted them. One of them overseas, which was really scary. A guy that's accused of having financed and participated in snuff film production of children in a credible case, not a conspiracy world allegation. Like these are allegations coming from police reports and investigations and people who died and people who saw this footage and then they reported it and they died, and it's a whole twisted world. But I think for me it was kind of one of those things where once I read about it and I understood that this is what we were looking at and dealing with, I knew that I wanted to use my platforms to talk about it because of the Epstein thing. Because I knew my friend and I just made a video about this morning that I'm going to post on my social media. In 2018, my really good friend and I were sitting in South Dakota at my parents' house. I was smoking a joint with him in my parents' hot tub, just like chilling outside. And I vividly remember him telling me about this Jeffrey Epstein guy back in 2018. And I was like stoned as hell. And I'm like, what, dude? Like, that's crazy, man. And I kind of, believed him, but I didn't know what to think about it. And then 2019, Epstein's arrested. And I saw that headline and I was like, holy shit, my friend was right. And then Epstein commits suicide, ostensibly,
Yeah,
which
right.
we all know didn't happen. But
So that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But yeah, I mean, it's wild, dude.
yeah, that was the moment that for me I was like, holy shit. Yeah, these things are very real. And now having become friends with all of these survivors and I've worked with people in Amsterdam, India, Germany, all across the United States and sat and cried and become really close with a lot of these survivors. It's I don't know, the problem is just so wide spanning. And the real problem is that this has been happening for decades and no one has ever taken it seriously. So we have networks of thousands and thousands of survivors that never received justice. And it's mainly because a lot of these people were connected to the upper echelons of power, whether that's political power or just money in general. It's crazy what these people can get away with, even in South Dakota. It's crazy, man. There's this guy named Denny Sanford who's the richest like guy in South Dakota, and years ago, the hospital system in South Dakota used to be named the Sioux Valley Regional, whatever. He took it over, he donated billions, and now it's all Sanford. And there's a children's hospital. and it's so eerie. There's a statue of Sanford. There's two of them actually in my hometown, Sioux Falls, and he's got kids on his shoulder. He's got kids in front of him. A few years ago, they found over 30 child porn images on his personal email, and normally if you find 30 CSAM images on someone's device, they go to prison or they get arrested, they have a charge. What ended up happening though? Nothing. It went away. No one was ever, they said he was hacked. No one was arrested. It's still a story that's developing because of the weirdness. In fact, the guy's personal attorney, Denny Sanford's personal attorney, would end up becoming the Attorney General of South Dakota, and he was previously the Attorney General. So, and now he's running for governor, which is why I'm trying to bring this story back up because I hate the dude.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just like a microcosm example of money influence. You can make things disappear, even with children. I mean, I saw Alan Dershowitz say it on an interview recently, like, if Epstein would have been intelligence, if he was arrested for crimes against children, and you went and told the prosecutors, hey, he's an intelligence asset, leave him alone, would they have left him alone? He's like, yeah, yeah, even crimes against children. Yeah, yeah, he's intelligence. You just get away with it. It's
It's
nuts,
it's
man.
I think this thing is like people still don't understand the depths of it all. Like you said, like you're talking about these little microcosms in South Dakota and everywhere else, and now we know a much bigger deal of it because of Epstein. And then all of a sudden, okay, why is it that every single person in power, every single person who has money, every single person who whatever is now involved in this? Have you done a deep dive in that? Like, because I know you're going through all the files, man. Like, if anybody finds, shout out your Instagram really quick, because if they find it, people can see how deep you're diving into this stuff. So, what's the handle?
It's the Paranormal Files.
Yeah, and you're just going ham on these files and diving deeper. Like, how deep and twisted do you think this whole Epstein thing is going?
I mean, it's deeper than anyone can even conceive because it's what really is happening here is the curtain is being pulled back. And yeah, the child abuse and the trafficking of children, that's horrific. And that deserves, all the attention in the world. And that's why I've dedicated like all my accounts to fighting that sort of crime for years now. But with Epstein, we are seeing a dark machine of power and influence and murder and cover-ups of cover-ups. It's not even just that they're trying to cover up this sex abuse of minors. It's they're covering up financial crimes. They're covering up murders there's so many murders that are mentioned and alluded to that were never really investigated. They're covering up just the power structures and dynamics. I mean, it's people that said that they never interacted with each other in the public eye, and yet in the emails you can see that they're very close friends or they're tightly knit. I mean, to me, it was shocking to see people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and all those individuals getting with Epstein so frequently and discussing all of these things. And you've got, I mean, you got
And post
Epstein.
original conviction.
Yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
the thing too. Like
that's the
dude
big
was already
thing.
convicted previously. Now, and I would look at that from a standpoint of like, okay, communication before that wasn't related via email, not using things like pizza, not using weird terms that all of a sudden you're finding in all these emails. Anything before that, okay, like they were introduced or whatever, and then once he was criminalized or criminalized with the first thing and they cut off, okay, cool, maybe there's a something we should look into. But the fact that a lot of this happened post the first thing was unbelievable to me.
And yeah, that's the thing. What's the most shocking is when you not only see all these people that, I mean, like I've never thought Elon Musk or any of those guys were good people, but it's like when you see people that are respected having these interactions with Epstein post conviction, it's like what were they thinking? I mean, this guy's been he's not only just an evil dude, but he's a pedophile. He's a convicted pedophile, and yet what was I just thinking? What was the email I just read? I just covered this email and they were talking about providing like people to Epstein or whatever, vice versa. It was some celebrity, but there's all this sexual talk between these people and Epstein. And I don't know. I mean, if my friend, it turned out he was an accused child sex trafficker and a hardcore abusive pedophile. I would definitely drop them as a friend,
Yeah.
but nobody did. It seems like almost nobody stopped hanging out with them. In fact, based on like the emails that they've released, it's almost like Epstein got even more popular after he was convicted of that because that's when the bulk of the emails are really coming from that we've seen.
Yeah.
And yeah, you could go crazy all day trying to decode stuff and yada yada. And there are all these different weird, bizarre allegations, which I'm I'm more inclined to be open-minded to the truly bizarre stuff, not only because I've been working in the paranormal for 11 years, so I've my reality has been shifted for a long time, but I've interviewed people that were victims of those sorts of things themselves. Like this woman, incredibly sweet woman who we worked with in Germany, who's a part of a survivors organization. We interviewed her as a part of our shoot over there, and one of her stories was that she had been trafficked by her parents into this cult, a group of individuals who would have these meetings in the countryside. And she said at one point, they got all the kids and they put them in a circle and they got this naked, full grown woman and she was like bound and whatever. And they put her in the center of this circle of kids. They put a pistol up her genitals and then blew her head off in front of these
Oh.
children. And then they said, she told us that the other adults then told the kids to lick up the meat. That was her exact verbiage that she used. And so I get it. I
Mm.
get when it's hard to believe these things. And I mean, you can't really litigate something without evidence and properly prove it. But when you sit there like I have and you actually work with these people and you get to know them and you hear their stories and you hear the authenticity in their voices and you hear it time and time and time and time and time again, it's like I don't know. There is something more insidious that happens in this world. You're naive if you don't think that things like that have happened. Like anything terrible you can possibly imagine in the worst nightmares, besides, I mean, things that defy the law of physics, those things have all probably happened at some point
Yeah.
on Earth. Because you can never underestimate the fucked upness of people, It just the depravity never ends.
Yeah, dude, and I'll tell you what, man. Like the conspiracy theory world, I was never a big part of it until a lot of people started to wake up in 2020, and then started to kind of go down that rabbit hole from that standpoint. And so, like, you start to get glimpses of it. I was never a deep researcher of it. I would just see certain things, and I just wouldn't question whether it was real or not. I'd be like, okay, that's interesting. Let's find out more. And these Epstein things have me in a place now, and I think a lot of people are, which is why I want you to address it. I think a lot of people that are kind of opening their eyes up now are going like, okay, well, what is it? Like, is it really rich, sick, sadistic people who then, or is it really rich people who become sick and sadistic, or is it really sadistic people who, in a sense, sell their soul for the fame, money, and power? Because if you notice, people who are paying attention to this is the first time in the last 10 years that something major is happening and Hollywood is not speaking up.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's all the above. I think you've got people that are attracted to power because they want to go on to abuse that power. And there are also people that get to the top and they're innocent, but they have to be corrupted. That's a part of the system. I mean, Epstein, at the end of the day, just like some of these other historical rings that we could talk about, the Chicken and the Bulls ring in New York City. We could talk about J. Edgar Hoover's pedophile blackmail parties at the Plaza Hotel in New York. All these things that have been documented. It's it boils down to with Epstein and his handlers, this was at least in part an intelligence operation. It was the blackmail. And one of the rings that we're doing this documentary series about that we've been working on it for 2 years and we've got 20 plus people interviewed for the series, multiple victims and we've even got perpetrators that are admitting to taking the blackmail photographs for this ring. uh, Anyways, it's a lot to get into, but that's it. The exact same thing was happening in the 1980s and 90s in America, and about as soon as that whole thing uh, went under, Epstein's operation started, and
Wow.
there are clear pathways between these rings because that ring that we're making the documentary about, it was exposed about 10 years after the one the other one that we're making the docuseries about was exposed, which is what I was in the Independent talking about, which is the Frank Sheldon ring, the original Epstein. He had his own island. I mean, he's a multimillionaire, potentially a billionaire, like extremely politically connected family. Grandfather's the governor of Michigan, like really, really, really important dude from Michigan, um, who once again molested children on an island. He filmed them. They produced mountains of CSAM videos and photos. There were hundreds of men, thousands that were subscribed to the CSAM mailing service. There were men that visited the island. There were men that participated in all this and ran the cameras and abused the children. And at the end of the day, one guy went down for that. He was his accomplice. Frank Sheldon, the main guy, the billionaire, he absconded and he left America. And that's kind of the starting point of our docu-series is what the hell happened to this guy? Because
Huh.
he wasn't a spring chicken, but he was like, I don't know, like 60 or so when he fled America, even in his 50s, I believe. So he had a lot of years. And what ended up happening is he left America, and the ring that he either helped start or globbed onto was even bigger than what was going on here in America. And the people that we've talked to and the information that we've gathered, I mean, it was an Epstein style operation that spanned all the way to India. And when I'm there in India, and we're in the middle of nowhere in India, hours from the nearest city, in the literal mountains, in a small village, talking to people, and they're able to positively identify this guy through a picture, and then they talk about how he molested them over and over, or he molested this person, and then all of a sudden we hear allegations that there's someone that's been murdered and they're buried here, and blah blah blah. I don't want to talk too much about it, but that's for me when you start to realize, there's a reason why these people aren't caught, and there's a reason why they aren't properly investigated because yeah, their connections with Sheldon and various powerful people, and obviously Epstein. Epstein's got. I mean, it's so obvious for people, but you still don't see them talking about it in the mainstream media.
Of course not.
Like it's even a part of the story. When was the last time you saw? The only article I've seen was some douchebag debunking the intelligence connection, and I'm like, okay, so not only is there like tons of evidence for it, but I mean there are literal like documents and emails showing that Epstein with like, for example, the former prime minister of Israel, they were going around selling software, like literal backdoor spy software to different countries. Like
Yeah.
that's just on its face like an
Dude, there's
intelligence
there's so many
thing.
things, and the fact that it's not being covered by mainstream media is not surprising, but also mind blowing at the same time. Like at the heat of everything, as they were releasing, I think the second round of all the information. By the way, there's still more. They're gonna make you think that was it, but there's more. Um,
Oh yeah.
my wife goes, yeah, I went on to some news website, and she's like, it's not even in the top 10 news things of the day. Number the top three were like Virginia Guthrie's mother, right? So, or like Virginia, whoever Guthrie's mother, her name might be Virginia. I don't know. I don't watch TV, so I don't know these daytime talk show people. But you get what I'm saying. Like, that's not a bigger story. I'm sorry. And scrolling through your social media will prove to you that it is not a bigger story. And there's just so many questions. And I think that's the thing, right? We can just keep going down and down and down as far as like, why are the files missing around 9/11? Why are there like, there's so many bigger things, and I think the real question is who's at the top, and I don't know if anybody has that answer.
Well, it's really interesting. I just watched the film. Have you seen The Age of Disclosure, that documentary?
No, I don't think
It's
so.
about
Maybe.
it's about UFOs and aliens.
Oh yeah, I think I watched part of
It,
it. Yeah, yeah.
man, it is so interesting and mind-blowing to see these ex-government employees making these statements and talking about things that they were made privy of while they worked there, about crash retrieval projects and the actual recovery of biological remains of aliens. Like they're talking about multiple species of aliens that were recovered from these crashes that exist at US bases, and like it's like so mind-blowing to hear all this shit coming from real people with real credentials. And the thing that stuck out to me in that film was, I can't remember who they were talking to, but it was a former guy at the CIA, and they're basically stating that, if you're the top guy at the CIA, you're like a political appointee. You're just being brought in for 4 years or whatever. Same with the
Hmm.
president. So a lot of these top secret programs, they never make their way up to the top brass. And then
Right.
within that, there are even more secret programs that exist within 10, 20 people. And within those programs, there's even secret, more hidden programs. And that to me is so frightening because you'll never get the truth about like an Epstein or any sort of intelligence connection or operation there because either they kill those people before they can talk or they're just truly evil people that want to keep it going.
Yeah.
And it's not a big operation like with the files, like I've been saying since the beginning. If you blackmail someone and you traffic children to these rich people, you're not going to make a document that says, like, oh, George Bush molested a child today. Her name is blah, blah, blah. It's like that shit is not going to exist. People have to learn to read between the lines, connect the dots, and then yeah, I mean, the files that really would show it, they're gone. They're either shredded or they didn't exist in the first place. So
Yeah.
that's the challenging thing about Epstein is like they're not going to just write down like, oh, he paid me $30,000 for this child today. Like, here we go, blah blah blah. It's never going to be like that.
Yeah. Do you think Epstein's still alive?
I don't know, man. That's one of the weird ones because I personally, and people disagree with me on it, I feel like he was definitely killed because there are people in the past who have done very similar things to him, stories that we're telling, who definitely died. And they died very weird, suspicious deaths. Now, and I mean, personally, I think if Epstein was still alive, I mean, he'd be such a liability. What would
Yeah.
be stopping him from just randomly one day going and telling a story? Like he could do that if he was still alive. And I don't know why they would keep him alive when that's a potential. But I mean, the autopsy photos, the mismatched whatever, the ears and all of that
Yeah.
shit. I mean,
All the
it
things.
is
Yeah.
weird. And then the guy, the file with the guy and the body swapping or whatever, the post that he made on 4chan that was verified, like you can't make that stuff up, but it's the whole thing with Epstein, man. There are no answers. They provide no context. They give you no information. They dump a shitload of photos and videos that have no meaning, but they at the same time mean so much. And then they just declare that there's no investigation needed and
Yeah, dude.
we just need to carry on. Like Trump says, I've been exonerated. Let's stop talking about that. Or Pam Bondi with the Dow.
Over
That's crazy.
50,000. Yeah, dude.
Yeah,
It's
shit is
we're
wild,
we're
man.
living in a movie, right? And it's funny that you brought up the Disclosure television show as Spielberg's dropping Disclosure Day this year. And like
Oh
it's
yeah.
really funny when you see a lot of similarities about real life that are in Hollywood. And Hollywood tends to happen first. And it's like this interesting type of really weird world we're living in. And my whole thing to everybody is like just question everything, even if it's something you
Yeah.
always believed in. Question it a little bit, right? And I think that's a really good place to start. And also find something to do to keep your sanity, because humans are not meant to ingest this information to see the things we accidentally see on the internet. I mean, you're diving deep. I refuse to dive deep because I don't want to see some of the stuff that are on those files. But like, do something that you're going to keep your sanity. As if you decide to go down this rabbit hole, like people listening right now, it's just a crazy thing to think about, man. So I think from the standpoint of like the documentary work, when can we start looking for it? Is it releasing somewhere? What's all the good stuff?
Well, we are hopefully going to be finishing production in the next month, and then yeah, we're taking it to the people that want to see it already, and hopefully it'll be. I mean, our goal is to get this out as soon as possible because we have the Sheldon series, the Frank Sheldon, the Island series,
Hmm.
which is unbelievably explosive, and the things that we saw just producing that. You can't unsee. You can't unlearn. And we've had confidential sources that have told us things that we couldn't show their identities, and people within the government that have spoken with us, and um, it's really really shocking. But the big bad boy is the one that I don't want to like name and talk about yet, just out of kind of safety concerns for us in the project, which is about this other ring that is. There's never been a documentary. Well, there was one that they produced this film, and then right before I was going to be released, it got pulled. Um, and there's copies of it online now, but it never officially aired. And yeah, it's a photocopy of Epstein that happened in the 1980s, and we were trying to push for it to be released as soon as possible because hopefully it'll be like a match that starts a fire. It shows people, look at this story and you can see what happens if we do not do the right thing right now at this incredibly important moment in history. Like even for me, a little off topic, but I've been thinking like, what the hell can we do? Like what is the logical step? Like you and I can talk and I can rant and blah blah
Yeah.
blah. This guy sucks and he did this. What can we do? So what I'd like to see is like some sort of action. Like I'd like to see like a protest. Like in the 1990s, it's a different rabbit hole, but there was an Epstein in Europe. His name is Mark Dutroux, and I did a whole documentary about him. They call him a serial killer because he's responsible for like 6 or 8 children's deaths, and it's really horrific stuff. But he was like the Epstein. He was providing kids to this network of rich pedophiles that went all the way up to the royalty in Belgium. He even had a guy working over him who was his leader named Michel Nahoul, who said in an interview, "They'll never arrest me. Essentially, they'll never question me because if I tell them the truth, it'll bring the whole system down." He said that in a newspaper article,
Dow's not over
basically saying, "Come
50,000
arrest me.
though.
You won't." Yeah. And so what happened with Dutroux is people saw the cover up happening live. And this is in the 90s. And they had this thing called the White March. And they had over 300,000 people in Belgium out on the
Wow.
streets protesting the government's handling of a pedophile ring. And 300,000, doesn't sound like a lot, but Belgium is a small country. So it was like a significant portion of the population. They were all out. And you could see the videos and photos from that day. And it's really inspiring. So I feel like that's where we need to be because people also ask, and I get shit for it. Like, why do you cover like the graphic things that you see, and why are you talking about this? And people call me all sorts of names and say that I'm like whatever. And I've had people call me a pedophile because I'm just reporting on this stuff, which is fucking insane to me. But my answer to all those people is always, like you have to hear this and we have to be angry. Like people are still not angry enough. You need to
It blows my
understand the
mind.
potential implications of what happened, like torture and murder of not only adults but also potentially children. We're talking about hundreds, thousands of kids that were abused, that were molested by these rich and powerful people. We're talking about child porn being produced and pedophile parties and orgies and all the worst things you can possibly imagine are all in those files for you to see if you want to look at them. And that's why for me with my content, especially on like Instagram and TikTok, I'm like, people need to be hit with this so that we can get pissed.
Yeah.
It's no more time to sugarcoat this. It hasn't worked in the past. It never worked in the past. That's why all these people got away with it with all these rings that I've been working on for years. And I just don't want it to happen anymore. And the way to do it is I mean, look at what happened in England. People were pissed in England. Now Andrew's been arrested. I
Yeah. If it
mean,
was
he
it
wasn't
this morning,
arrested for
right?
the child stuff. Yeah.
Well, I think if something is
So,
going to happen on a broad scheme of things, it's always they're always going to be arrested for something else. It's always going to be a
yeah, right.
secondary thing. It's always going to be whatever. But yeah, my wife and I were literally just talking about how like these people protest everything. Why are they not pissed off and protesting about this? That's the crazy part that I can't quite. I mean, we can't. If I went down the rabbit hole as to why, we'd be here for another hour. But like it's an interesting thing as far as like why we aren't coming together as a humanity because it's beyond just America. So as a humanity to protest to speak up is mind blowing, which is why I wanted to have this conversation with you. So thank you so much for coming on. And I always wrap up every single interview with the same question. But before we get there, how can people find you? Obviously, we already talked about the doc, which they should keep their eyes open for. But how can people find you, connect with you? What's all the good stuff?
On all my socials, it's the Paranormal Files. So like Instagram, TikTok, I'm the Paranormal Files. On YouTube, I'm also the Paranormal Files. And then if you want to hear me rant about Epstein, which I do every other day. It's the Conspiracy Files on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. And then finally, my wife and I host. I mean, she's an incredible writer and researcher. Our podcast is called Murder in America, and we were on Times Square for the show a year or so ago. It was a really cool opportunity, and we have an amazing audience out there that listens every week, and we also advocate for totally different justices with Murder in America. And that's to wrap that up. Is that's what's interesting is when I was talking about Gacy and my introduction to this world, it was through all this research when I kept coming across all these stories of pedophile rings that no one was talking about, that no one knew about. And that's when I don't know, it became like my goal to talk about this stuff and then going to rehab and getting sober. It's like it's a mission I feel like I have. Spiritually, I feel like I'm on the right path because of some really weird shit that has happened to me while we've been filming these documentaries, which we're actually including some of the footage in the series. So it's crazy. But yeah, I mean, even here, man, I feel like I was meant to be right here today, having this conversation with you. Everything happens for a reason.
Dude, I appreciate it, man. So, like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question. That is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Honestly, I'm gonna say, after I got sober, after getting sober was the most beautiful time of my life. Um, got out of rehab. It was extremely challenging, you know, having to navigate life without any of the comforts that I used to have. But I just really dug in and started working and producing, and I was finally able to do the business that I always wanted to do and handle things how I wanted to handle them. And I got control of my life again. And then everything just lined up. I had the biggest uh, summer in my life on YouTube with all my documentaries, 4 hour long documentaries, getting millions of views, talking about pedophiles and all these investigative things that we were doing, which was awesome. Uh, all my accounts came back to life that I had ignored because of my obviously my addiction. And then the biggest thing was my relationships with like my wife and my parents and everybody, all my friends. That all, I think fixing all of those and mending all of those, even though they weren't really like broken, it was just like shedding this horrific shit that I've been dealing with for so long. It enabled the growth. And then once you find that peace, within yourself, man, it's just like the things that you want to happen, they start to happen. And yeah, it was a really, really good time in my life. And I'm still riding on that high right now with all these projects, even though I'm bogged down. Like, dude, I didn't expect to start filming that series in 2024 and to still be here. We just shot more of it 2 weeks ago to try to finish it out. It's crazy, but yeah, it's a blessing. It's a blessing to be alive. Should have been dead with all the things that I did and substances I abused, but something's kept me here, and it shows itself. And I'm just happy, man. I'm really
I
happy.
love it, man. Colin, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. Please keep advocating, keep doing the things you're doing, making awareness to people. And thank you so much for coming on, dude. This has been a blast.
Yeah, dude. If you ever want to hear more rants about extremely dark and disturbing subjects, I'm your guy.
I love it.
We can talk all day.